This episode of Back to the Roots podcast is brought to you by Byron Seeds. The folks at Byron Seeds believe organic requires a different perspective, plan, and approach. Organic isn't simply a different type of product or even a different way of farming. It's a different way of thinking, planning, commitment. It's a different philosophy on how to feed the world. Many won't understand, but the people at Byron Seeds do. We're owned by organic dairy farmers. We not only have the product, but we plan, manage, and execute organic. We speak your language, we share your struggles, and we laud your successes. Organic isn't a way of doing business, it's a community. We learn from each other. We're in this together. We'd be glad to talk cropping plans, management systems, the road to profitability. We understand what you're trying to do. We're farmers just like you. Visit us at byronseeds.net or give us a call at 800-801-3596. And thanks to Byron Seeds. This episode is also sponsored by Soil Biotics. Soil Biotics Soil Boost, applied with spring-applied dry fertilizers, will help to improve soil structure, maintain nutrient availability, and stimulate microbial activity. Use Soil Biotics Organic Growth Boost plus SB 5500 to help burn down and stimulate soil microbes to break down crop residues. Soil Biotics will also be participating in the Moses Organic Farming Conference virtual farm show called Growing Stronger, collaborative conference on organic and sustainable farming, taking place February 22nd through the 27th. Register today at mosesorganic.org and plan on talking with our Soil Biotics representative.
Today I am joined by Ann Miller, a dairy farmer in Fredericksburg, Ohio. She will be one of our regional updates, Women in Ag, this year. Ann, thank you for joining me. I appreciate you taking the time to do this all throughout the year. So can you give me a little bit of your history and the history of your farm?
Yes, like you said, I'm Ann Miller from Northeast Ohio, and we live on an organic dairy farm. My husband is Kevin, and we have 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. Seth is 15, Laurel is 13, Claire is 9, and Ben is 7. We live on my home farm, which my great-grandfather bought in 1918 at a sheriff's sale for one of his children, which turned out to be my grandmother. They said back then the farm was mostly in thistles. And, you know, it's 100 years later, and I think we are still struggling with some of those seeds. They had a very fine seed bed. The other evening, we were talking, my dad and I, and we reached the conclusion that we think a cow has been milked in our barn every day for the past 100 years. I mean, we could not think that anything ever came up that we did not have a dairy herd in the barn. So dairying definitely is in our blood and in our roots. The farm here is 120 acres with pasture, hay, oats, and corn. We have a woodlot, and about 25 acres of it is in permanent pasture with a creek running through it. We also rent about 50 acres from our neighbors. Like mentioned previously, we dairy for a living, sending our milk to Organic Valley Crop Cooperative. We have around 50 Jersey cows and raise all our own replacements. But we also raise chickens for eggs, broilers and pigs, and beef for meat. We have large gardens and fruit trees and bushes. We try to raise and preserve most of our own food, although, of course, we can't do it all, but we do what we can. We do our field work with draft horses and also use horses for transportation. The children have 4 ponies that they use for transportation, but actually mostly for pleasure. As a farm wife and mom, I have plenty to keep me occupied. I help with the milking mornings and usually evenings, although we trade off as needs arise. We freshen our cows in the spring, March and April, and in the fall, September through November. Right now we have quite a few dry cows. The chores are pretty simple. So the children, actually this evening, I'm taking off to talk with Mike here, and the children are doing the milking and my husband. The winter months here, I sew a lot of our own clothes, and winter, of course, is the time to do most of that when we don't have the outside work. Although I'm not organized enough, I still have to sew other times of the year as well. But that's a main project for the winter. We also host church services in our own home about once a year. And the weeks before that are usually the time to declutter and organize and deep clean every drawer and closet and actually out in the barn as well. So that was what I was doing mostly during January. It makes the month of January go very fast. The feeling is wonderful to purge and just get rid of a lot of things. We've been having beautiful winter weather here in Ohio, cold, much colder than the past years. We have a farm pond, which is frozen over, and we've been skating the last 3 evenings. And today, our children go to a parochial school. So today, this afternoon, the school children went skating. So my husband and I and several other oldies went with them, and it was wonderful. I hope I'll be able to move in the morning, but we had a lot of fun. We also do a lot of sledding if there's snow. Winter on the farm here is what we consider our downtime. I mean, we're of course busy with the chores, but it's much more laid back. We have time to catch up on reading and relaxing, maybe playing more games in the evening. It's just, if it's dark outside, that's usually when our work usually stops. Then we come in the house, and it's also about the time of year to start ordering seeds. We have a small greenhouse, and I start most of our garden plants from seed. So someone said you should order them early this year because there's a renewed interest in raising your own food, which we think that's great. Basically, that is a nutshell what's been going on, what's a little bit of a backstory of our farm. We think it's a wonderful place to live and to raise our children. I consider myself so fortunate. I mean, just to know that my children are playing in the same creek that my dad did and his siblings. I mean, we know all the same nooks and crannies in the barn because the barn is as old as Dad. So, yes, I think it's a wonderful privilege, and we're very blessed to have such deep roots. I think that's all for right now, Mike.
Okay. What do you help with the milking, or kind of what is your role in the day-to-day operations?
The day-to-day operation, yes. I've always enjoyed being outside, so I always milk in the morning and usually in the evening as well. And if we have heifers to move or fence to make, or if I'm busy with something else, you know, my husband and my oldest son can get it. But I like being outside, so I help a lot in the day-to-day decisions, and I always keep track of the cows that need to be dried off, and I do a lot of the record keeping, and also the organic certification. I do a lot of that as well.
And for people who don't know, you are actually my sister, and you're on our home farm. So when you talk about the nooks and crannies in the barn and down in the creek, I know every nook and cranny that you're talking about. But I guess I had no idea that there were actually cows milked for 100 straight years in that barn. That's kind of crazy when you think about it.
I think that's why things are hard to improve, because there has never been a time when the cows are going and, okay, how should we set up the barn to make milking more efficient? Cows have got to be milked every morning and evening. And if they've been doing it for 100 years, you know, changes come in small, small ways. But we like our setup, but it's definitely an older setup.
Yeah, it would actually, as somebody who grew up there, it would pain me to see the cows not being milked in the barn, but I know in the future that probably will have to come to an end eventually. We kind of thought maybe we'll just let that for the next generation. Oh. Then decide if they want to build a parlor or something. I mean, we're okay with it this way. For now, anyway, at least I am. Okay. Well, Ann, thank you so much for taking the time and making the commitment to do these updates this year. I'm really excited about having you as part of the group, and I also think being Amish and farming with horses will maybe add a little bit of a different perspective that we don't hear much. So thank you so much for taking the time and for doing this. You're quite welcome. I enjoyed it, and I hope to speak with you in a couple months again. Thank you, Mike. Today I am joined by Joelin Mcclellan from Petaluma, California, who is a dairy farmer and will be one of our regional updates featuring women in ag this year. So Jolynn, thank you so much for taking the time to doing this summer or this whole year. And can you just give us a little bit of your background and the history of your farm?
Sure, and thank you very much for asking me to be a part of this. So my husband Robert and I milk about 260 cows, like you said, in Petaluma, California. However, we're sort of on the outskirts, a little bit closer to a smaller town called Valley Ford, if anyone's ever traveled around in our area. So we're in Sonoma County, about 40 miles north of San Francisco. We are on the way from Petaluma to Bodega Bay. It's a little coastal town that a lot of tourists like. So sometimes people know what I'm talking about when I reference that. We have been with the co-op since August 2011. I come from a long line of dairy farmers. In preparation for this, I was kind of thinking back. All four sets of my great-grandparents either owned dairy farms or worked on them. I grew up on a conventional dairy farm in Marin County, out in the Point Reyes National Seashore. It was a dairy farm that my great-grandfather started in 1919. He had immigrated here from the Portuguese Azores Islands and started the farm. My grandfather continued it, and then my parents became partners. So I grew up out there, and eventually, so Robert and I met. We both participated in FFA and 4-H and FFA, but we met while we were showing dairy cattle in FFA at one of our local fairs. Struck up a friendship and then later began dating. And he started, so this farm, my father-in-law is George McClelland, who's also an OV producer. And he had bought this particular farm in 1998 from a dairyman that had retired. And George had started the process of transitioning it in the early 2000s. And he had started milking organic cows, and I believe it was 2003. And Robert had worked for him. And then a few years into it, he was ready to sort of strike out on his own. And they brought this farm back up into an operating dairy. And so he started milking cows here in 2005 with about 150 cows. We were with another processor at the time. And then, like I said, we came over to Organic Valley in 2011. We were very, very happy to make that move and have been very happy ever since being with Organic Valley, and very proud, especially with the mission and everything that they stand for. It's been a pleasure being a part of it. We have two sons, Colin, who is 13, and Luke, who is 9. They are active in 4-H, and they were playing sports, but now since COVID, some of that has come to an end. But 4-H has still been able to continue. So living where we live, there's a high population, and so COVID numbers have been pretty high. So unfortunately, at this time, all of their 4-H things have had to be via Zoom, but at least their club is still trying, and they're still having project meetings and what have you, and they themselves have a couple, their little dairy herd is slowly growing, and in the springtime and into the summer, they also raise market hogs as well. So yeah, that's sort of a snapshot of my history and the farm now.
Mm-hmm. And what is kind of your role in your operation?
So my role, I am the bookkeeper. I am the record keeper, and I do all the organic paperwork. I also oversee animal health and especially with the calves. We also have a veterinarian that comes to the farm once a month, and we'll do a pregnancy check, and he'll just kind of walk around and just look at the animals, and their overall condition. If we have any questions, he'll help answer all that. So I work with him and do all the record keeping on that. And HR manager, we do have 3 full-time employees that work here. So I take care of payroll and training, and just trying to stay on top of whatever rules and regulations that come with having employees. California is a very highly regulated state in that regard. So trying to keep up on all that as well.
Mm-hmm. And do you raise most of your own feed, or are you running on mostly purchased feed?
So we raise some volunteer silage, and then we do purchase silage from neighboring farms. And then all commodities and grains are purchased, and then hay is also purchased from out of area. A lot of it comes from Nevada and sometimes Northern California.
Mm-hmm. So most of the land that you have there would be used for grazing acres?
Yes. So here on the home farm, we have about 220 acres, which about 190 of it is available to the milk cows for pasture. We have all of our calves here, and we keep them here until they're, depending on the time of year, till they're about 6 to 9 months old. And then we do have other properties that we rent that we take the heifers to. And then we bring them back when they're ready to calve.
Mm-hmm. And because I am here in cold, snowy Ohio, how is the weather out there this time of year?
Sorry to break the news right now. There's blue skies and the sun is shining. However, in a normal year, so our rain season sometimes will start October, November, and last through April, maybe a little bit into May. We, in a normal year, get about 39 inches of rain. So far this year, we got an extremely late start on rain, and anything that's come, it's just been stretched out over time, and maybe just like an inch here, half inch there. Like yesterday, we got about a half an inch of rain. We're probably looking at a total of only 7 to 8 inches so far. And here we are in February, and I don't know where we're going to get another 30 inches, between now and April. So we're definitely drier. We're in a dry spell. We are okay with water, although our dam is probably the lowest that we've ever seen in the 15 years that Robert's been here, or I guess almost 16 years now. He's even talking about maybe having to start up a well that we normally don't use to sort of offset that. But there are farmers in my area that are hauling water every day, almost all day, to water their animals. So it is definitely not a good situation this year in our area, precipitation-wise.
I find that really intriguing and interesting with water, because basically anybody east of the Mississippi, water is kind of a non-factor. You, of course, have your droughts and things like that, but out there, it's a different world with water.
Mm-hmm.
So what time of year does your normal grazing season start, and how late does it go?
So normally we can start turning the cows out on green grass. Now, granted, we do let them be out even when the grass is dry. So our dry season is probably July till about October, and that's when our grass is brown. And I know that that's very different compared to other areas of the country, but that's when our grass is dormant. And like I said, if it starts to give us some rain in October, November, it'll start turning green, and we'll let them go out to it. Now, obviously, at the beginning, their full diet isn't coming from grass, but they are able to go out and nibble some. And we let them out, if it's a normal year, kind of that January, February, March, April, May, they'll really be grazing heavy on grass. And we can even have them out all the way till the end of June. And then like I said, then the grasses start kind of turning brown around that time. So that's on a normal year. This year, it's been, delayed. Now, granted, in that big spread of months, if there's a lot of heavy rain, we will pull the cows into the loafing barns that we have just to give our pastures a rest and not get too damaged from the moisture and cows walking all over them.
Mm-hmm. That's intriguing. It's completely flip-flop from here because we won't be seeing any cows on grass. The earliest here is generally like April 15th. And then we also have really warm in July and August, but guys are still grazing through it. Then in September, as it starts to cool down, we get green grass up until into November. So it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting that you're just pretty much on the complete opposite end of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, Jolynn, I really appreciate you taking the time to give us an update and giving us a little bit of your background and how you got here today. So I really look forward to having you on the rest of the year. So thanks a lot for doing this.
Thank you very much.
So today I am joined by Abbie Corse. She's a dairy farmer in Brattleboro, Vermont, and will be on our regional farmer updates this year as a part of the group of Women in Ag. Abbie, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you give us a little bit of history of your farm and of yourself as well?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for having me on today. I'm honored to be here. I farm with my parents on our farm that has been in my family since 1868. We've always existed as a grazing dairy. We're at 2,000 feet, and so nothing grows here but grass. So it fits the model well. We've been certified organic since 2008. We began the land transition in 2005. And I came back to the farm in the same year that we achieved organic certification, and have been here ever since. And I sort of split my time. My father calls me a full-time mother and a part-time farmer. My kids are 10 and 6, and my husband runs his own construction company and is a contractor. And so the primary caregiving falls to me, and I sort of juggle the farm work in and around those needs.
And when was your farm has been in operation for a long time, hasn't it?
Yes, I think we're at 100. I'm terrible at math. 153 years, I think, in May.
Oh, wow. And at this time of year, I, of course, have to ask about the weather because here in Ohio, we're supposed to get a bunch of snow this week, and I heard that you got some up there as well.
We are currently getting more. It is currently snowing. It has snowed more days here than it hasn't. It reminds me of a winter like when we were kids. It's compacted a lot because it's been decently heavy snow, but there's, 2.5 to 3 feet of snow. It's bananas. The snowbanks are making my kids thrilled.
I can imagine. Have you had any issues with like getting milk trucks to the farm?
So far, we've been really lucky with that. Our milk truck driver is, a modern day hero and just traverses the roads as though it's no big thing. But it's that type of snow that, packs down into sort of icy sheets and makes the maneuvering of all things mechanical quite interesting. So it has its share of challenges, but so far we've been able to get the milk picked up when it needs to be picked up, which is a great credit to Scott, our milk truck driver.
I don't think milk truck drivers get enough credit for what they have to deal with during the winter.
They absolutely do not get enough credit, period. I think.
You mentioned that your farm is at 2,000 feet elevation, so it's a grass farm.
Yep.
Do you raise any corn or any grains?
We don't, no. So historically, we did used to plow mostly for, subsistence crops. So squash and potatoes and things like that were raised for the family. And we haven't tilled any land in, I want to say at least 35 years, maybe almost 40, because I'm almost 40. So yeah. About 40 years that we haven't put a plow in the ground. So our entire operation is perennial grass-based.
Mm-hmm. Now, you do feed grain to your herd, or are you a grass-fed herd?
No, we do feed. We average between, I think it's about 7 to 8 pounds per cow. Depending on the cow and the time of year and production, between 2 to 14 pounds of grain is, I think, the most that they ever get. Because working with the amazing agronomists and nutritionists at Organic Valley has led us to the understanding that our soils, as of right now, just aren't capable of producing forage that could meet the herd health needs, and we want to prioritize that over just being grass-fed, so we do still feed enough grain to keep their, their health needs in prime focus.
Mm-hmm. What time of year does your grazing season start?
It's usually mid-May, and the last 5 years or so, it goes a little bit longer every year. This year they were able to be out until, I want to say that we had them out maybe even into the first week of December this year, but certainly up until Thanksgiving, they were still able to be out.
Mm-hmm. Well, so you probably get about, 180 to 200 days of grazing.
Yes, that sounds right.
Mm-hmm. And you're all the way in the southern part of Vermont. Is your weather completely different than, way up north?
It really depends. We're in kind of a funky microclimate here because of being high up and where we're positioned. I mean, we can sometimes have, crazy storms and things like that. And then 12 miles from here, even there's no bad weather. But I think it's more that the way that the storms tend to impact northern Vermont and southern Vermont, just the timing is different, but the severity is similar, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, you mentioned before we started recording that you were asked to be the farmer representative on a climate change task force?
Yeah, so Organic Valley actually just put together a sustainability and climate task force, and I am on that. And then in addition to that, Vermont just passed a Global Warming Solutions Act, and as a part of that, they set up a 23-member climate council to set forward the recommendations and strategies to try to hit the targets that the legislature had put in place. And so I applied and was chosen as the farm and forest representative. So that's been quite something, and I foresee it as something that's going to take up quite a lot of my time for the next year or so as we try to figure out, the most appropriate ways to try to formulate policies to put forward. And I really felt that, policy tends to be made so often in isolation of the people who have to actually carry it out, that it seemed really critical to me that the person representing the farming and forestry sector was somebody who is actively engaged in doing the work that's being asked of people to do on the front lines of climate change.
I think you are exactly right there.
I
think it's so important to have the people that are going to be doing the changes to have a voice at the table. So that's one thing I would really like to hear updates on that going throughout the year, because that's going to be something that's definitely going to impact farmers in the future. So, well, Abbie, thank you so much for giving us a little bit of your background, and I really look forward to talking with you throughout the year to get some more updates. So thanks again for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Today I am joined by Melissa Weiland, who is a dairy farmer in Neenah, Wisconsin, and I also work with Melissa. She's a dairy pool manager for Organic Valley, and she will be joining us to do the regional updates with the Women in Ag portion. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this, Mel. I know life is busy with everything that you've got going on, but thanks for joining us, and can you give us a little bit of your history and a little bit of the history of the farm?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. So a little bit about me, I guess I'll lead in that way, is that, yes, I am a very active person. I work on my farm full-time. I also work with you full-time, which is a story for another day, right? But I also am an integral part of some other projects in my community. Primarily, I am working right now on starting a food co-op in my local region. So we are going to be the first and only food cooperative right here in East Central Wisconsin. And now that it is winter time and the farm is a little bit slower, I'm feeling myself being really pulled to spending a lot of my off time towards that project. And that my involvement really there is to really fulfill my desire to help make healthier, natural, organic foods more accessible to more people. So when you're talking about a region that doesn't have something like a food co-op locally, that is something that is going to really help make change for a lot of individuals in that area. A little bit about my farm. So we have been on the Organic Valley truck for 20 years. Get this, Mike, it will be 20 years and 2 days. So,
wow.
Cool, right? I love telling that story because I feel like every single Organic Valley farmer knows their anniversary of when they came on the Organic Valley truck, but they don't always remember other key anniversaries in their life. So I will leave that to the imagination. But so yeah, we will be 20 years on the truck this coming week here, which is a really exciting milestone, really for anyone who has gotten to be a part of the co-op for that long. We were really drawn to organics really through my mom and dad. So the original Weiland family farm had been lost in the late 1980s farm crisis, and my parents, my mom and dad, started up farming right around that time in the late 1980s, which is when they had me. And so their journey had really led into, again, being a startup, but also having seen firsthand the market crash, if you will, arguably the largest, if not the largest, agriculture market crash we've ever seen in all of agriculture's history. But they had been led they knew they were going to dairy farm. They were already on their way to startup, and they knew going into it that they needed to do things differently. And at the same time, my dad had an uncle who worked for Midwestern BioAg at the time as a representative, and he really helped my mom and dad and really pulled them into education around soils. And so our entire farm startup 25, 30 years ago through now has been soils focused, all centered around the old-fashioned rules of the old biological farming program that Gary Zimmer teaches. So stepping forward all the way today, we now milk 120 cows and operate around 1,200 acres, all certified organic. The whole farm is certified. We don't have any land currently transitioning, although occasionally we'll pick up some acres and transition them also.
Well, Mel, thanks for that. And just to throw this out there, you were actually on an earlier episode of our podcast where you really went into more detail about the history of your farm. So if people want to check that out, that was a really interesting episode. But what is your current role on the farm?
Okay, so on my farm, I am, well, on family farms, we don't really do titles, right? So if any of my family listens to this and be like, what in the world are you talking about? We don't have business cards. We don't have titles on there. But no, what I do is I serve as the herd manager. I do all of the livestock management and oversight, all of the records. As organic farmers, everyone knows the depth of work that is in itself. For the farm. And I also do all of the people management. So we have some relief help as well. I also did a podcast for the Over the Gate on farm labor. So I actually go into detail in that topic on another podcast with Organic Valley as well. But I manage all of the people stuff and that type of work, as well as of this last summer, I'm now also the grazing manager. So I do our entire grazing program, with the exception of any seeding. So my dad is still maintaining control of that. That's really his passion, and we haven't made that changeover. But everything else with grazing is me. So people, grazing, and cows.
So which do you prefer, cows or people?
Oh, I don't know if I should answer that.
Okay, probably not.
I am a cow person through and through. I think I complement my dad very well. He's the primary person that I farm with. He is an exceptional crop and soils person. And I am very much, cows have always come very natural to me since I was very, very young, even like before I was in grade school. So, yeah.
Now, are there other projects that you do on the farm, say with produce or anything else like that?
No, I don't have time right now. We are, we're always thinking in the times that we're in of ways to diversify, but not currently. I am starting a very small flock of chickens this year that I am going to graze. I'm going to take my hand at pasture eggs, which is very interesting. I see a lot of paralleling between pasture cows and pasture eggs, so I'm so curious to dive into that. But outside of that, no.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we are in the middle of winter, and I know you are in the cold north. So how has your weather been this winter?
The winter leading up to about 2 weeks ago has been the dream winter. If there was a dream winter for any upper Midwestern individual, we had it. It was very mild, no severe wind chills, a little bit of snow. It was amazing. But now up until we're coming up at about a week now of single to negative digits. We've been hovering around zero for about a week. And it gets tough. It gets tough because you're in a state of wondering what's freezing, what do I need to thaw out? You're checking on every animal several times a day. You can't move any manure, so in your freestyle barn, it just freezes and you are stuck with it until you can get in there and you get a little bit of a thaw. So it's cold right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think we're cold when we hit single digits, and then I heard like 21 below up there, and I was like, no, I'm good here.
Yeah, right now we are in our low, or for the nights will drop into like -10 has been kind of the normal. I see we've got a -16 on Sunday. It's been funny, the last couple Sundays have been the two coldest, so I'm not sure what it is with Sundays. I guess we're being asked to slow down a little bit, right?
It sure sounds like it. I know that would slow me down.
Yeah.
Well, Mel, I really am looking forward to your reports this year, just with the different variations in weather patterns and everything that we've going on with these updates across the country. So is there anything else you want to share on your initial report here?
Yeah, so I am so excited to be doing these through this year with you. And in lieu of my excitement for this, I actually am looking forward to every time I do one of these, I'm going to close my session with some form of a farmer self-care tip or a family tip or something like that. And this month, what I would like to just share with you guys an idea to weather through the cold weather, if you will, or weather through the chilly temps, is to consider making your own homemade bone broth. So in my kitchen, anytime I make anything that has a bone in it, whether it be chicken, or if I do a whole chicken in the crock pot, or wings, or maybe even steaks or pork chops, something that would have a bone in it, I will always take the leftover bones and just throw them in a gallon Ziploc bag in the freezer. And then once that gallon Ziploc bag is full, it is the perfect amount to throw into my crock pot. So I will throw that into the crock pot, fill it up just about an inch from the top, throw in also vegetable scraps. I will save any onions or celery. Those are my favorite. And then any herbs that start to age on me, I will throw those in there and let that sit on low for 24-ish hours. And enjoy that. And what's so great about that is it's a very hearty, warm, fulfilling beverage to just grab. My bone broth in my house, there are only 2 people in my house, it never makes it to the fridge or the freezer. We always tend to just scoop some out and drink it, especially when the weather is the way it is right now, because it's so comforting. It is also amazing for gut health. So I know there are probably a lot of dairy farmers listening, and you're always talking about the cows rumen. Well, we need to be thinking about our guts and our gut health as well. And homemade bone broth like that is one of the best things that you can sip on. So my pro tip for this cold, cold February in the upper Midwest is to make some homemade bone broth. Check into it.
Wow, great tip. That's great. I like what you're doing here with this the self-help tip. So thank you so much for that, and thank you so much for joining me today, and I really look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks, Mike. Take care and stay warm.
Brought to you by Soil Biotics, providing full circle improvement for soil health and plant growth.